A prophecy says Kyra will end the Four Horsemen. She cuts the oath that made them monsters, and becomes the only thing they can't conquer. They call themselves the Four Horsemen, and I'm the girl who's supposed to end them. The city hadn't seen a real night in 3 months. Not because the sun refused to set, but because the grid refused to glow. No power, no street lamps, no neon, no humming refrigerators to lull you into pretending civilization still worked. Darkness was complete, feral, a mouth around a prayer. People burned furniture and hope in 50-gallon drums that gave off greasy light and the smell of varnish. You learned to walk like a rumor, eyes down, pulse steady. I carried matches, a bone knife, and a prophecy that didn't ask for my opinion. The mural on the wall of the old transit station used to show a woman with a torch. Now, someone had added antlers and a blindfold and painted the torch black. Beside it, 4 tally marks carved into tile, shallow and deliberate. The horsemen had passed through here. I touched the grooves and let my breathing slow, the way Mother taught me. The knives of the world need sheaths or they cut themselves. Follow the wound, she'd say. Blood finds its level. The first scream arrived as a low, elastic sound, fear stretched thin and plucked. The second came clipped and permanent. I broke into a run. Down the tunnel, a bonfire had colonized the platform. Pale men with improvised badges ringed it, guns held like toys that bit. Their leader had a smile that thrived in crisis. 2 civilians kneeled at his boots. A third shape stood in the shadows, too still to be owned by fear. I knew him before he moved. Jacob. War. He wasn't broad like a weightlifter, he had the vertical strength of a storm. A long coat hung open over a slate shirt and a red tie like a tongue. Blood spotting his collar looked curated. The men with the guns didn't look at him. They didn't have to. They were already his. He glanced at me as if boredom had conjured me for a moment's entertainment, eyes the brown of oak bark wet with rain. The tilt of his mouth said he knew what I was, or at least what I carried. When he looked away, the gunman followed his disinterest like tidewater. Pick, their leader said to the kneeling pair. One lives. The woman cried. The man shook his head, whispered something about a child. Jacob watched with a trained detachment that made my vision white at the edges. Stop, I said. I didn't shout. The word was a coin I dropped into a fountain whose well ran straight down. Jacob's head turned a fraction. I saw the moment his attention focused, narrowed, clicked. Stop, he repeated, tasting the syllable like he was deciding whether to buy the brand. I stepped into the light. Sweat glued my shirt to my spine. The bone knife's handle pulsed against my palm. My mother had carved glyphs into it with a needle, not for luck but for math. Old math, the kind that counts lives in oath blood. The prophecy had been born before the horsemen, but not before hunger, conquest, pestilence, war. Old names, new suits. I'm going to make you a deal, I said. One of the men laughed. Jacob didn't. What a relief, he said. Bargains are back in fashion. You let them go, I said, nodding at the kneeling pair. And I'll go with you. No fight. He stared at my throat, at the pulse there. Then down to the knife. Then back up to my face, a map he read in reverse. Silence folded itself in careful squares. Behind him, a new shadow separated from the wall. Johnny, death, moved like smoke remembers fire. He had long white blonde hair pulled into a low knot and a face carved to seem younger than it was. Eyes the pale gray of a winter pond, scanned me as if memorizing measurements. He wore gloves. Even during the collapse, some men held on to rituals. The glove leather looked soft enough to apologize for touch. Is this entertainment or acquisition? Johnny asked Jacob. His voice had a cadence that made it sound like he was quoting himself. Both, Jacob said. She offers herself. She's offering a vector, came another voice, wry as a hangnail. Joey. Pestilence by the old stories, though he claimed sickness like it was a confession he'd already paid for. He was dark-haired, edges softened by exhaustion, a hoodie unzipped over a t-shirt that said "Trust me, I'm a doctor" in cracked white print. He had been one, once. You could still see it in the neatness of his hands. Vector is just Latin for ride, said the fourth, balancing on the lip of the platform like gravity owed him rent. Jace. Famine. But really, hunger. His cheekbones could slice paper. His smile could make you think starvation was a diet you chose. Let her in, Jack. Let's see if she bites. The bonfire snapped and hissed. One of the gunmen shifted, boots scraping concrete. Deal, Jacob said. He didn't look at the kneeling pair when he said it. He looked at me. The gunmen lowered their weapons anyway, muscle memory in the shape of obedience. The woman sobbed, then scrambled to her feet, dragging the man with her. They ran. Shoes clattered. The tunnel swallowed them. Jacob stepped closer. A heat came off him that wasn't the fire. He smelled like iron filings and pepper and rain on concrete. He held out a hand. I did not take it. Your knife, he said, palm up. I looked down at the bone handle, at the fine lacework of glyphs my mother's hands had cut while her lungs were crumbling. She used to cough roses, petals bright with blood. It's sentimental. Aren't we all? Said Jace, amused. Come on, sweetheart. House rules. I slid the blade under the strap at the back of my belt, let my shirt fall. It stays. Jacob's mouth tilted again, not a smile, not a smile. For now, he said. Then to his pack of dogs in thrift store leather, go home. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The men dispersed like he had opened a door in the air and they'd smelled the inside of it. Johnny turned and began walking, no hurry, easy as a knife falling point first and finding the gap between ribs. Joey followed, hands in hoodie pockets, shoulders forward as if trying to apologize to the dark. Jace dropped from the platform, landing soft. Jacob waited. When I finally stepped to him, his hand closed around my wrist with a pressure that told me he'd mapped the fragility of bones ages ago and never stopped finding it interesting. Kyra, I said, because names are mirrors and you should choose what they show. I know, Johnny said, without turning. They lived in a courthouse older than most of the city's lies. The marble steps were cracked, the columns smoke-stained, the eagle above the door spray-painted with a target around its eye. Inside, the lobby smelled like wet stone and old money. The old seal in the floor's mosaic, Justice blindfolded, had been cut out with a saw. In its absence, an empty circle waited like a hungry mouth. War, death, pestilence, famine. Or Jacob, Johnny, Joey, Jace. For functions disguised as men. For men pretending at functions. The city had called them the Horsemen because the world loves its stories neat. They did not ride. They walked like problems that no one had the vocabulary to solve. They led me down a staircase to a level that hadn't been on the blueprints. The corridor walls were raw limestone with rusted hooks. Electric light came from a jury-rigged array of batteries and wires that looked like a dare. Johnny unlocked a steel door and waved me through into a space that had been a records vault once. Now it was something between a war room and a monastery. Maps covered one wall, paper over paper, layers slashed by grease pencil arrows and circles. Another wall held shelves of glass jars full of dried herbs, pills, bandages, syringes. Joey's altar. A small table near the center held a chessboard with a game in progress. Jace's boredom had teeth. A cot waited against the far wall. Clean sheets. An insult cloaked as a courtesy. Jacob took my knife and set it on the chessboard's empty black square like a bishop out of place. We'll talk in the morning, he said. Don't try the door. Because it locks? I said. Johnny glanced back. Because the house is older than locks, he replied, as if explaining thunderstorms. Jace leaned against the doorframe, studying me like a problem he was dying to be assigned. He had a chipped tooth that made his smile look like a secret gone wrong. What are you supposed to end, Kyra? He'd said my name like a dare. I let him have the dare and didn't blink. You. Just me? He asked, mock-injured. All of you, I said, steady. That's what it says. Prophecies are gossip with better branding, Joey murmured, moving to his shelves, hands counting jars like rosary beads. They name the weather but not the wind. Jacob turned the key in the inside of the door, then pocketed it even though he'd told me not to try the lock. He wasn't careless. He was performing confidence for an audience of one. He was good at it. Sleep, he said. Eat, Jace added, tossing me a square of something wrapped in butcher paper. I caught it by reflex. The paper left grease on my palm. You look like the sort of girl who says no to hunger until hunger says no back. I'm not your project, I said. Jace's eyes warmed with something that wasn't kindness. Everything is a hunger. They left. The door clicked. The house breathed around me, old and sure. I unwrapped the food. It was cold sausage, dense with pepper and salt, the kind you could chew into a meal if you had a mouthful of stubborn to help. I ate. You can't fight a storm on an empty stomach. You can't seduce one either. On the cot, I lay on my back and stared at the ceiling, which had been white once and now was a library of stains. I pictured my mother's hands on the bone knife. I pictured the lines she cut, a triangle split like a mouth, a circle bitten, a little fork like a serpent's tongue. The pattern had a name in a dead language, a name that translated to, not that begs to be untied. She told me the prophecy as if it were bedtime, as if children could sleep with destiny humming in their bones. A girl born under a painted moon in the hour between brass and breath. A girl whose blood remembered the original accounting. She would end the horsemen. She would. End. Such a stupid, versatile word. Finish. Kill. Culminate. Unmake. Or, less dramatic and more dangerous, complete. I didn't sleep long. I didn't need to. When I woke, Joey sat on the floor by the shelves, knees up, reading a medical textbook under a battery lantern. He didn't look at me right away. He waited until the page turned itself in his hands. How's the patient? I asked. You? He rubbed at his eyes under the hood's shadow. Stable. Dehydrated. Defiant. Just the one? I said. He half smiled, weary and sincere at the same time. There are always more patients. Why help them, I said, nodding at the shelves. Why make a clinic in a courthouse if you're destroying the city? He closed the book and looked at me fully. I saw the weight he carried, the arithmetic of triage tattooed behind his eyes. You say destroying, he said softly. We say stopping the bleed. Cutting to save the limb. Mistakes were made when the world thought growth could be infinite. Did you just justify apocalypse with a surgery metaphor? I asked. He shrugged. We hate that the body is finite. And we keep writing laws like it isn't. Johnny appeared at the door as if conjured by a change in temperature. He leaned against the jamb, posture relaxed enough to advertise danger. Breakfast, he said. Come look at the way the street looks at us. They did not take me outside. The house had a balcony that used to overlook the fountains. Now it overlooked absence. The fountain bowls were cracked, the bronze statues stripped. A waterline ringed each bowl like a bruise. Below, people moved with a new economy born from scarcity and fear. They avoided the courthouse with the polite determination of citizens pretending not to see a crime they could not afford to report. Jacob stood at the railing, bare forearms folded, eyes measuring portent. He didn't turn when I stepped out, though his posture altered by a whisper when my foot met stone. Awareness radiated off him like heat maps. "You wanted to end us," he said, as if we were resuming a conversation he'd left to steep. "How? Do you want the poetry," I asked, "or the math?" "Poetry is just math that refuses to show its work," he said. "Either." I touched the railing. It was cold enough to earn a flinch. I kept the flinch on the inside. "Old blood," I said. "Older than yours. There's a knot in what you are. A choice someone tied into a loop a long time ago. It's begun to choke the city. I can cut it." "Unmake us," Jace interpreted, lounging in a chair with boots on the marble balustrade, an apple in his hand like a prop in a play that had opinions about sin. "End doesn't have to be a race," I said. "But it could." Johnny had taken off his gloves and was cleaning them with a care he didn't waste on people. His hands were elegant and unremarkable, a magician's trick. "Your mother taught you this," he said, not asking. "She taught me how to read the line where violence pretends to be order," I said. "And how to cut without killing." "Useful talent," Jacob said, and for the first time there was something like interest in his tone. "Not curiosity. Curiosity walks. Interest commits." The apple crunched. Juice shone on Jace's mouth for a second, then was gone. "If she can untie the knot," he said, "what does that make us? Threat ended, or something worse?" "Free," Joey said quietly, surprising all of us, including himself. The word hung there, soft and obscene. I looked down at the street. A kid in an oversized coat was bartering shells for a bandage. The woman with the shells measured every moment like it would break if mishandled. "You've built a kingdom where people survive by proximity to your will," I said. "You feed some. You crush some. You scare all. The city obeys because it believes you're inevitable." Johnny tugged on his glove and buttoned the wrist with a slow patience that made the gesture feel like a blade. "You're proposing an alternative." "I'm proposing an ending," I said. "If you're very lucky, it's also a beginning." Jacob finally looked at me. The look was a weight. "And if we're not lucky?" "Then you won't be around to mind," I said. "War enjoys honesty." He smiled, briefly, like a wound learning to laugh. "Try," he said. We went to the basement where the seal had been cut from the mosaic. The absence in the floor felt like the negative space in a painting, the way the saint's halo makes the saint without paint at all. The empty circle had begun to weep a stain like old tea spreading from a cup. The courthouse had a mouth and it was drooling apocalypse. "House is sick," Joey murmured, half to himself, half to the air. He stood at my elbow with a tray of things that shouldn't have fit together, a vial of honey, a piece of rusty chain, a silk ribbon, a syringe. "It's not the house," I said. "It's the oath the house remembers." Johnny stood opposite me, hands behind his back, head bowed as if at a funeral. Jace sat on the stair rail, swinging one leg, bored and bright. Jacob walked the perimeter like a man checking a fence for weaknesses. "I'll need blood," I said. Jace smirked. "Always." "Not yours," I said, and looked up into War's eyes. "His." Johnny's gaze slid to Jacob. Joey stilled. Jace's smirk sharpened. "Why mine?" Jacob asked, not offended, which told me what he thought of blood. "Because you're the hinge," I said. "People confuse you with nature, but you're not weather. You're a contract. War is the clause the others enforce. Without war, hunger is a diet, sickness is a season, death is a statistic. Your blood is the edit." He rolled up his sleeve, exposing an arm that held stories of old fights in faint pale lines. He didn't ask if I knew what I was doing. He arched a brow that said he would enjoy it even if I didn't. Joey handed me the syringe. His fingers brushed mine. They were warmer than I expected, human heat. I found the vein by touch and slid the point under skin. Blood filled the chamber with an honest speed that made my mouth taste copper. Knife, I said. Johnny fetched it from the chessboard and passed it to me hilt first, his gloves back on. The bone felt different now, like something waking, a dog lifting its head. Mother's glyphs pricked my palm through memory. I kneeled at the edge of the circle and cut my thumb fast, a thin bright line that stung. Blood beaded and fell, 6 drops around the circumference, equidistant, math that tasted like prayer. I dripped Jacob's blood into the center, and it spiraled, not down, not out, but inward to a place that wasn't quite here. The air went tight. The light leaned away. Say it, Johnny said, very softly, like asking the sea its name. I spoke the words my mother had put into my mouth when I still had milk teeth, syllables with gravel in them, a language that built roads before it built alphabets. The sound wasn't pretty. It was precise. The stain in the circle pooled into pattern. In it, I saw flashes, a battlefield wet with what the poets pretend is dew, a crop rotting on the stalk because men with swords had opinions about borders, a woman alone with a fever while the priest preached about virility. I saw a room with 4 men younger than these 4 being asked to swear. They swore not to protect, but to win. The oath braided around their throats like jewelry that bit. Whenever they tried to be more than function, the oath tugged. And, I said, and pressed my cut thumb to the center of the circle, to the place where Jacob's blood had gathered. The courthouse exhaled like a bellows. Power moved. It wasn't a lightning bolt drama. It was like a lever shifting a small distance and changing the angle of everything it held. The knot loosened, a rope gone slack, an old grip sighing open. Joey grabbed the rail, breathing hard like he'd just sprinted. Johnny's head tilted. Jace sat up straight, eyes very bright for once. Jacob staggered a little and then laughed, startled, quiet, dangerous. "What did you do?" he asked, and for the first time he sounded like a man confronting uncertainty instead of wearing it like a coat he'd tailored. "I ended the oath," I said. My thumb burned. The cut had turned white around its edges. "Not you." Johnny reached to the circle and touched the damp mosaic with a gloved fingertip. "We're unbound," he said, not believing it, believing it. "You're responsible now," I said. "Which is worse?" Jace stood and hopped down, hands in pockets like a boy. "Freedom's just hunger without a menu," he said, and it sounded, briefly, not like a joke. Something shifted under everything, like the city had been wearing a weight vest and someone had finally unclipped it. The lights in the basement flickered, once, like a heartbeat returning to normal. Then the gunshots started outside. Chaos is a language. If you listen long enough, you can tell accent from slang. These shots were panic, not plan. The horsemen moved before I did, Jacob to the stairs, Johnny to the side door, Joey to his shelves. Jace turned to me with the most honest expression I'd seen on him, delight edged with worry. "You wanted responsibility," he said. "Congratulations, Queenmaker." "Not queen," I said, walking past him. "Surgeon." We came up into the lobby like a lung filling. Outside, the square had erupted. People had gathered at the courthouse doors, too many, too fast, faces flushed with the heat of doing something they had rehearsed in their hearts. Some had sticks, some had signs made of old election placards with the names scraped off. Someone had a real flag. The bullets had been warning shots into the air from a man who'd mistaken his chest for a drum. "They chose today," Johnny said, tone clinical. "They smelled change," Joey said, hands full of bandages he might need, hope knotted in his throat like a swallow caught. Jacob pushed open the doors and stepped onto the top stair. The crowd recoiled and then surged like surf. His presence did things to people. At a distance it feels like confidence. Up close it tastes like a dare. I moved to his shoulder before I thought about it. The air around him felt like the moment before a decision. Jace stepped to my other side, lazy and lethal. Johnny and Joey flanked behind, symmetry like a storybook illustration of a sin. They're angry, Joey said, a little awe, a little fear. They're alive, Johnny corrected. Go back, a woman shouted, voice hoarse but brave. We're done with you. You don't get to choose for us anymore. The sign she held read, we remember how to be a city. The R had been mended with duct tape. Jacob looked down at them with the expression of a man being given an exam in a subject he had invented. He could scatter them with a sentence. He could break them with a gesture. He did neither. Then choose, he said, voice clear, carrying, terrible and beautiful. Take what you've been told is ours, if you want it. But understand what it weighs. Someone threw a rock. It hit the stair and skittered. The silence around the sound was deeper than a prayer. I stepped forward. He's right, I said, hating that he was. You can't stand here and perform rage like a folk dance and expect power to hand you its keys. You want the city back? Take it. Feed it. Heal it. Patrol it. Fail, and it dies faster. A ripple through the crowd. Murmurs formed into a shape that might become a voice. Jace snorted, soft. Johnny shook his head once. Joey watched faces like a doctor listens to lungs. A man with a beard white as glue raised both hands. We organize, he said. We've been meeting already. We just need supplies, a woman interrupted. Maps, said another. Medicine, said a third, looking at Joey like he was a well. Authority, someone whispered, as if the word were blasphemy. Borrow ours, Jacob said, to my shock and maybe his. For a week. We won't break anything you build if you don't break it worse. Terms, Johnny murmured, impressed against his will. The bearded man nodded, startled by getting what he asked for. We'll send a council by afternoon. Neutral ground? The rotunda, Johnny said. The old library, Jace countered. Books make people polite. Here, Jacob said simply, the word flat iron on silk. Our house. If you won't meet a thing where it lives, you don't actually want to change it. The crowd digested that. Then something like a decision moved through them, shoulder to shoulder, spine to spine. They began to disperse not as a surrender but as a task list. Jacob exhaled slowly. His hands had fists in them he hadn't closed. You gave them a rope, Joey said. I gave them a week, Jacob said. A week is a rope, Johnny answered dryly. Jace looked at me, head tilted. You changed the math, he said. Now it's interesting. Now it's dangerous, I said. Same word, he replied. The afternoon turned into a working organ, beat, breath, bleed, repeat. Johnny brokered. Jace rationed. Jacob stopped fights by stepping into space and asking for volunteers. Joey ran a clinic that turned into a poem about patience and loss. I moved like thread in a wound, stitching, tugging, cutting where old tissue strangled circulation. The council that arrived to negotiate looked like a mosaic of the city's old and new faces. The bearded man with hands that had built fences, the woman who taught music in a church basement for bartered eggs, a teen whose hair was green in defiance of the lack of dye, who spoke for the blocks south of the tracks with a voice learned on soapboxes, a nurse with hollow cheeks and efficient eyes. They came into the basement war room with shoulders squared to hide how scared they were. You can't keep everything, I told the horsemen, privately, before the meeting. Not the food. Not the guns. Not the myth. Keep the myth, Jace said under his breath. It's calorie-free. Give them enough, Johnny mused, polishing a button on his cuff. But not what kills us. Freedom without order is just a longer death, Jacob said flat. We cut the oath. We didn't cut the world. Good, I said. Then say yes to most of what they want, and say it like you thought of it first. The meeting began as theater. Speeches. Statements of position. History rewritten politely into alibis. Johnny played chair because Johnny could make a riot feel like a seminar. Joey presented inventory with the resigned grace of a man who knew numbers couldn't be charmed. Jace yawned in ways that made the yawn a critique. Jacob sat in silence long enough to make silence part of the terms. When it turned into actual bargaining, it did so without a sound, like anesthesia ending. In the end, they gave up control of 3 distribution centers, 2 water trucks, and access to the courthouse kitchen in exchange for keeping the clinic supplied and retaining emergency command over the East patrols for 7 days. "You'll abuse it," the teen with the green hair said to Jacob, "Chin up." She didn't tremble. He respected her for it in the way he respected a knife that had been sharpened by grief. "I'll use it," he said. "And you'll be watching when I do." She nodded. Agreement, not surrender. When the council left, the room felt larger, as if a wall had stepped back. Joey leaned against his shelves and let his head fall back, eyes closed. "People," he said. "Endless variety of the same problems." Johnny smiled, "A winter sun. You love them." Joey didn't deny it. Jace slid onto the table in front of me, hands braced behind him, posture open. "We did something almost moral," he said. "Hate it. Want more." "That's how hunger works," I said, not looking at his mouth. He leaned forward. "Do you know what your ending looks like now that you've started writing it down?" I met his gaze. Messy. Honest. Earned. He watched my face like a map. "You smell like wild mint and trouble." "Back off," Jacob said, voice mild and cold from the doorway. Jace didn't move. The two of them looked at each other in the way cliffs and oceans do, endlessly, competitively, familiarly. "Jealousy," Jace mocked, amused. "Focus," Jacob corrected. Then to me, "Walk." I went with him up to the balcony where the evening had painted the skyline the color of a bruise healing. "You cut the knot," he said. "You made us men." "You were always men," I said. "The oath just allowed you to forget the parts that broke." He turned to me as if I'd stepped on something raw. "Don't pretend to know my breaks." "Don't pretend to be the only one with them," I replied. Something in his face changed, briefly, like a child looking out of an adult's eyes and recognizing another child. It was gone before I could be certain. "Why did you come?" he asked. "Not why did you bargain. Why did you choose to walk into the mouth of the story?" "Because the prophecy said I would," I said. "Honesty is currency that spends everywhere." "Because my mother died trying to find you." "Because I'm tired of watching men who love power more than people rehearse the end of the world when the world needs a beginning." "And," he said softly, tasting the word again. "Complete," I said, and watched him understand. It started with a rumor that turned out to be a plan. A man who had called himself sheriff since the old one vanished had decided he didn't like redistribution when it didn't run through his hands. He gathered 20 with guns and 3 with mean dogs and marched toward one of the newly liberated distribution centers to reclaim order. Old world words do strange things when the oxygen level drops. Johnny brought the news in like weather. "We can let it happen and break him after," he said, "or we can make a spectacle." Jacob stared at the map, at an intersection of streets named after judges. "Spectacles feed hunger we don't want fed," he said. "But letting him win first teaches the wrong grammar." "Speak to the class," Jace suggested, lazy. "We go quiet," Joey said. "We go fast. We keep the food moving." They all looked at me then, which I resented and wanted. "Make a third thing," Jace said. "You're good at that." "Sheriff," I said, tasting the empty title. "He has a face he likes when he says it." "Break the face without breaking the man." Jacob's mouth twitched. "Surgical strike." Poetry pretending to be math, Johnny murmured. We went out as 5, which made people step back in doorways and press themselves flat like posters against brick. The sheriff's procession came down Lincoln like a parody of Victory. He had a hat. Of course he had a hat. His men were thick-necked with good posture, years of practice at being obeyed. The dogs panted, tongues pink knives. We met them at the corner where the street buckled around a tree root. Jacob didn't draw a weapon. He didn't have one visible to draw. He stepped into the lane of their march and planted his feet like a courthouse column. Turn around, he said. The sheriff spat, contemptuous, theatrical. We're taking back what's ours. What's yours is what you can defend, Jacob said. This is not yours. You got soft, the sheriff taunted. She make you soft? He jerked his chin at me like he was trying to put a pronoun on a spear. I smiled at him in a way that made a few of his men find 5 other interesting parts of the street to look at. There's no softer thing than a man who needs a hat to feel tall. Laughter rippled down the sidewalks, sharp and mean. The sheriff flushed. He pointed. Get them. Jace moved first, a stutter step that turned into inevitability. He wasn't a brawler. He was a hunger with hips. He slid under the first man's swing and took his knee. The man shouted and went down on one leg, off balance. Jace flicked his wrist and the man's gun was out of his hand and into Jace's. Jace tossed it away, contempt like confetti. Johnny went at the dogs with a handler's mercy, a firm voice, an open palm, a knee moving into the space where motion turns to intention. The dogs hesitated, confused by a predator that didn't smell like fear. He slipped leashes onto the concrete and stepped on them, pinning. Joey was a scalpel, precise, quick, ugly. He broke 2 fingers with a twist and apologized with his eyes while he did it. He kicked a shin. He didn't enjoy it. He did it. Jacob didn't throw a punch. He moved through the sheriff's offense like a man rearranging furniture. He put arms where they could not be usefully employed. He pivoted bodies around their centers. He took space and denied it. He had learned war as grammar. He declined the verb, to kill, and conjugated everything else. I went for the sheriff's face. Not to break it. To erase the arrogance that gave it shape. My palm met his cheek. His eyes widened in shock at the intimacy of it and I used that to step close, cheek to cheek, lips near his ear. You're done, I whispered in a tone that isn't a threat, it's a truth arriving. Walk back. If you don't, I will end your story and make you a footnote. Choose humiliation or erasure. Humiliation heals. He smelled like sweat and stale cigarettes and a cologne named Authority. He trembled, a tiny, treacherous motion. Then his shoulders dropped, minutely. He stepped back. He spit again, missing my boot by less this time. We'll see, he said, but it had lost the hot core. Your dogs are mine for the week, Johnny told the handler, who was too busy breathing to answer. Feed them. We let them go with dignity assembled from scraps. We didn't take the hat. Mercy can be petty. When we were alone again with the buckled street in the watching windows, I looked at Jacob. You're welcome, I said. He looked back at me like I was a knife he wanted to own and didn't yet trust. He had blood on his cheekbone that wasn't his. I lifted my thumb to wipe it away, then stopped. He caught my wrist, gently, as if touching a live wire. Finish the motion, he said. I did. The pad of my thumb grazed his skin, took the red with it. Heat moved between us like an animal turning in sleep. The world narrowed to a point so precise it could cut. Jace made a derisive sound soft enough to be merciful. Joey looked away. Johnny watched with a scientist's horror and delight. I put my thumb to my own lip, ridiculous and ritual. Copper. A taste like history. Jacob's hand stayed around my wrist. When he let go, he did it like an admission. Prophecies don't end when you do something dramatic. They watch you afterward, patient as wolves. The week stretched into a rope. The council did not prove incompetent. They made mistakes quickly and corrected them loudly, which is a kind of virtue. The city began to resemble a city again, badly lit and starving but stubbornly itself. The rumor mill worked overtime making sense of the new arrangement. In some versions of the story, I was a witch. In others, I was Jacob's mistress, Johnny's shadow, Joey's cure, Jace's appetite. None were right. All were close enough to be useful. In the clinic, I helped Joey with a boy whose fever made him dream teeth. Joey's hands were steady. His voice had the kind of calm that isn't feigned, it's forged. When the boy's breathing evened, Joey sat back on his heels and closed his eyes for a second, letting his own body remind itself of itself. "Why did you stay with them?" I asked. He didn't pretend not to know who I meant. "Because they're the only people who ever asked me to be honest about the cost of things," he said. "And the cost of you?" I asked. He met my gaze. "Payable on demand." "By whom?" I pressed. He looked at my mouth and then at the bandage he was wrapping, like both were parts of the same anatomy. "That question is why we're all in trouble." That night, Johnny found me on the roof, which had become my church. He handed me a mug of something that steamed and didn't smell terrible. He drank his without flinching. I sipped mine and apologized to my tongue. "You watch like a judge," he said. "You kill like a librarian," I said. He laughed then, a rare, quiet sound. "I file things," he admitted. "And sometimes I close books." "Why gloves?" He flexed his fingers in the leather. "People feel," he said. "They leave residue. Germs? Stories." We stood in a companionship that wasn't gentle, but that wasn't cruel either. The city hummed below like a machine that remembers being fed. "You cut the oath," he said after a while. "You broke the machine that made us predictable. That also broke the machine that made us safe." "Safe for whom?" I asked. "For you," he said, without looking. "The prophecy girl. The scissor. Now that you have a choice, so do we. You gonna use it on me?" I asked, and made my voice flippant so the tremor wouldn't show. He thought about lying. He didn't. "I don't know," he said. "I hate not knowing. I love it." "Messy," I said. "Earned," he said. Jace kissed me first. It was not romantic. He did it because he was hungry for a change of taste. He backed me up against a shelf in the dark stack of the old law library where he'd brought me to look at maps and then forgot the maps existed. He smelled like apples and danger. He put a hand on the side of my throat without pressure, just a measurement. He looked in my eyes to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. I kissed him back because to refuse would have been to pretend we weren't building the world by touch already. His mouth was clever and mean. When he pulled back, he grinned like a thief. "Prophecy girl kisses like a verdict." "You kiss like a dare," I said. "Everything is a dare," he said, and bit his lower lip as if to remind himself of his own mouth. Later, Joey touched my wrist where Jacob had held it, his thumbs circling, clinical and intimate. Johnny watched from across a room, gaze pure observation, as if to memorize a geometry proof he might need later. What angle makes a person lean forward? Jacob didn't kiss me. He stood close in rooms until the room changed shape to fit us. He moved my body out of harm's way with 2 fingers and made me furious with gratitude. He asked me questions that felt like checks you write knowing they'll be cashed. When he finally reached out on a night the courthouse power hiccuped and the lantern swung and the air felt like a decision asking for a signature, he touched my jaw with the back of his knuckles like a man praying to a god he doesn't respect. "If you do this," I said, my breath a thread, "you do it as a man. Not as war." His hands stilled. Then he nodded once. As a man, he said. We didn't make love. That phrase belongs to a world with candlelit bathrooms and chores lists. We dismantled each other carefully, clothes as excuses, skin as questions. I won't narrate the parts that belong to bodies. Desire is not a story for public archives. It's a set of coordinates you earn. What mattered was that in the morning, nobody pretended it hadn't happened. Jace made jokes about schedules. Joey made coffee with a focus that pretended to be about beans. Johnny watched all of us like he was testing hypotheses. We were a knot of our own now. And knots begged to be untied. Every story that matters has a counterstory gnawing at its bones. There's arrived as a whisper in the council room. A preacher with a following had found a page in a book that said when the four are unbound and the girl who ends them is known, then comes the feast. The feast would be a purification by hunger. Everyone not chosen would be emptied so the chosen could be full. Religion is just hunger with soundtrack. They're gathering at the stadium, the nurse told us, face pale with the particular fatigue of hope burned too often. He's promising bread and miracles. He has flour. Somehow. He has guns. Flour is miracle enough, Jace said softly. He'll march, Johnny said, tapping the map where the stadium's ring looked like a mouth ready to swallow a prayer. He'll eat as he goes. Cut it at the throat, Jacob said. Joey said, take him alive. Why? Jacob asked, genuinely curious, not rhetorical. Because killing makes him a martyr, Joey said. And we're fresh out of saints. Jace looked at me. Prophecy girl, he said lightly, but the word girl wore new clothes now. You have a cut for this knot? I have a mouth, I said. I can talk a man like that into saying his real name into a microphone. Johnny's smile was a blade laid flat. Delicious. We went to the stadium as 5. The council followed with a contingent that tried very hard to look like a militia and mostly succeeded at looking like school built from stubbornness. The stadium had been a temple for touchdowns, tailgates, and the belief that a scoreboard could tell you who you are. Now it held thousands. They had eaten rumor and come hungry for dessert. The preacher wore white. Of course he did. He had a beard trimmed to look accidental. He held a Bible like a visa to a better country. His voice seduced even ears that hated it. Safer under scarcity, he lied, and the crowd leaned forward. Full bellies make soft hearts. The city forgot discipline. I will teach it hunger's gospel. After the feast, we'll be clean. He was selling starvation as baptism. He was a poet without math. We walked to the 50-yard line as if it were a gallows. Johnny took the mic from an acolyte with a politeness that impressed her into compliance. He handed it to me. You don't need him, I said to the crowd. No preamble. No invocation. You need bread. You need builders. You need rules you write with the hands that feed you. He wants to make you light enough to carry. He wants to be the only heavy thing. Boos. Cheers. Noise. Almost words. He has flour, someone shouted. I have a kitchen, I said. And a clinic. And a map. And a city that is tired of pretending submission is safety. The preacher smiled the way men smile when they have a drawable weapon. Which, he called. Cohort of the whore of war. Envy, Jace coughed, amused. Come say it to my face, I said evenly. Tell me what you'll do with them when they are thin enough to obey. Tell them, too. Silence does strange things to a stadium. It can be a kindness. It can be a throat clearing. Today it was a dare folding itself into a chair. He came down from his platform because to refuse would have cost him a piece of himself he couldn't afford to lose in public. He walked toward me with the swagger of a man who had not been told no recently. He stepped close, aware that closeness is a tool. He smelled like flour and rot. What will you do with them? I asked, not into the mic, into his ear. When they've starved themselves righteous for you. Keep them, he said, because he thought the truth was a flex. Point them. Use them. God wants obedience. I'll make it. I moved the mic to catch his last sentence. It rang around the bowl, bounced off the concrete, lodged in chests. The crowd murmured like a wound discovering it could scar. He realized what I'd done a beat too late. He grabbed for my wrist. Jacob stepped between us with the efficiency of gravity reclaiming a falling object. The preacher's fingers met war. Fingers changed their minds. Arrest him, Johnny said to the council with a clarity that made it impossible to pretend he'd said anything else. Charge him with theft and incitement. The teen with green hair walked forward like a law in sneakers. She took the preacher's arm with a touch that looked gentle and was not. Others moved to help. The preacher snarled something about martyrdom and spit scripture like buckshot. It made lovely noises and changed nothing. People began to leave the stadium. Not en masse. In pairs, in tens, in small floods. Some picked up flour on their way out, bags carried like babies, eyes bright with a new arithmetic. How many loaves equal a life? We stood at the 50 and breathed like we'd finished a race we hadn't trained for. You like being on a stage, Jace murmured, close enough that my shoulder felt the words. I like being heard, I said. Different disease. Johnny's hand brushed my back, not possessive, not casual. Inventory. Jacob looked at me with that expression again, the one that could be prayer or bafflement. You make me useful, he said, almost angry. You make yourself, I said. I just cut knots. Freedom is expensive and unglamorous currency. Trash pickup. Schedules. Meetings where no one gets everything and everyone goes home mad enough to try again. The myth of the horseman began to molt. Underneath was infrastructure and desire and 4 men who were more dangerous as humans than they had ever been as archetypes. People brought us their grievances like stray cats. We fed as many as we could. We learned names. Names learn you back. One night, after a council session that tasted like chalk, I found Joey asleep in a chair with a chart on his chest. I took it gently away and covered him with a blanket. His eyes opened. He took my wrist, always my wrist, with a touch he could have billed insurance for. You'll leave, he said, not accusatory, not plaintive. When it's ended the way you think ending should look. I don't know, I said, which felt both like a lie and a confession. Stay until the week is up, he said, a prescription. Doctor, I said, and leaned down to put my forehead to his, a contact soft as punctuation. Jace, later, lay on the roof and counted satellites. Imagine begging for light, he said, and getting advertising. Imagine dying for God and getting hunger, I replied. Same brand, he said. Different flavor. You deserve better, I told him, surprising both of us. He smiled without humor. Deserve is a word rich people invented to make theft sound tidy. Johnny brought me a ledger at dawn. If we keep feeding at this rate, he said, we'll run out in 9 days. 9? I asked. Where did the extra 2 come from? Math, he said, smirking. And Jace. Jace saluted us with a piece of stolen toast. I can starve a problem until it confesses its true size. Jacob watched all of us as if we were pieces in a formation he was still willing to change. Pick 3 streets, he said. We hold them. We build them. We show the city what a beginning looks like. We did. We chose a corridor that had a school, a bodega, and a park gone mean. We cleaned. We posted. We hauled. We planted. We rebuilt a scaffolding for hope and made people climb it. They did. They complained. They came back. The council came to us at dusk on the 7th day. They had papers. They had a plan. They had a vote. We want you in it, the bearded man said. Not as kings. As components. Johnny glanced at me. He was a creature who preferred to be the hand, not the glove. Joey looked like a man being offered a church he didn't trust but needed. Jace's eyes brightened at the word component because it meant he could be a gear and still call himself an engine. Jacob regarded the papers as if they might burn. What's the alternative? I asked. You leave, the nurse said, blunt, tired, loving. Or you stay outside and watch us fail. Or you come in and risk being civically bored. Jace groaned theatrically. And, Jacob said softly, to me, reminding me of my job title. Complete. Take the seats, I said. Don't take the crowns. The week ended where the circle had begun, in the mosaic's absence. The house was quieter, as if endings had soaked up some of the sharps. You can still kill us, Jace said conversationally, perched on the rail like a him with elbows. I could, I said. You won't, Joey said, faith disguised as data. Johnny pressed his gloves flat on the table. Ending us as monsters did not end us as men, he said. We will disappoint you. Everyone does, I said. Jacob stood at the center of the circle where his blood had once spiraled like a decision you couldn't unmake. He looked older by a day and younger by a decade. War without a leash. Man with a job. You ended something in me, he said, finally, not looking away. I'm not sure I thanked you. You bled, I said. It counted. He stepped closer. The others didn't move away. We were within each other's gravity well now. That's the thing about white shoes, desire is not a zero-sum economy when the math is honest. We touched with hands that remembered oaths and broke them kindly. I leaned into Johnny's shoulder and felt him flinch at being allowed. I took Joey's hand and felt his pulse study mine and decide we were not, yet, a medical emergency. Jace laughed into my hair and said something rude that made me blush and then be proud of blushing. Jacob put his palm flat on my sternum as if swearing a promise to my heart instead of to me. I'll end you again if you need it, I told them all, fierce and exhausted and something like happy. Don't make me. Bossy, Jace breathed, delighted. Accurate, Johnny amended. Necessary, Joey said. Jacob's smile was small and real. True. Outside, the city made a sound I had rarely heard the past 3 months, laughter on a street not yet safe enough to deserve it. It moved through the courthouse walls and into our bones like a foreign language we wanted to become fluent in. The prophecy had been right, in the way old things are right because they have had time to be wrong and get corrected. I had ended the horseman. Not with a blade through throat or a bullet through heart. With a cut and a knot and a choice in a room and a kiss that asked for names. End means finish. End means purpose. End means limit. End also means aim. I was the girl who ended them. I was the girl who began them. The end.